if you had been a pollster going to knock on the door of my family's home, my father would have said, and asked, are you a liberal or conservative? He was, oh, I'm a conservative, But if you talk to him about the oil lobby controlling the legislature here in Texas, if you talked about the power of the Walmarts to squeeze out small businesses like him, you scratched as progressive a human being as you're ever going to want to be in front of.
Hey there, I'm Jesse Fox Mayshark, and this is Headlights, Voices from the Progressive South. Headlights is a production of the Progressive South, a nonprofit media platform dedicated to amplifying progressive voices and values across the southern United States. Voices like the great Jim Hightower, who you heard up top. I had the privilege of sitting down for a long chat with him on my recent visit to Austin, and I'm going to devote most of this episode to that interview. He had a lot to say about Texas politics and history, and all of it is interesting. That's coming up in just a minute. Later, in the Arts and Culture segment, we'll talk about why the South at first resisted the celebration of Thanksgiving. And if you guess that it has something to do with the Civil War, well, what doesn't really? First, a quick news roundup. This week I want to hit on some recent court decisions on major issues across the South and how they could play out. You can find links with more information on all of the cases in our show notes. We've talked a lot about redistricting and gerrymandering in recent months, especially in Texas, where the legislature's mid-decade redrawing of its congressional map set off a national scramble in both red and blue states ahead of the 2026 midterms. That Texas map, drawn intentionally to create 5 more Republican-friendly districts, was designed to satisfy a directive from President Donald Trump to protect the GOP's slim congressional majority. But in a move I think it's fair to say nobody really expected, a panel of Texas federal judges last week blocked the map on the grounds that it illegally dilutes the voting power of racial minorities. The state is appealing the decision. Texas Republicans argue that they were following U.S. Supreme Court precedent that says it's fine to draw districts for partisan gain, and that's all they were doing. For the moment, the ruling is scrambling the state's electoral picture for next year. Of course, the broader question of whether diluting racial minority power is even a problem is currently before the U.S. Supreme Court in the Louisiana redistricting case that we have also talked about here. Maybe with that case in mind, the Supreme Court quickly agreed last week to hear the appeal filed by Governor Greg Abbott. The urgency is amplified by an oncoming December 8th filing deadline in Texas for candidates in next year's congressional races. The court's conservative majority may not need to settle the issue of racial redistricting in order to dispense with the case. There's a Supreme Court precedent from 2006 indicating a preference for courts to not mess with election laws too close to an actual election. The justices could also decide to consider the case and let the lower court ruling stand. In any case, a decision is probably coming soon. Likewise, an interesting ruling in Tennessee last week on the deployment of the National Guard in Memphis may have an indeterminate shelf life as the state appeals. Hundreds of Guard troops have been patrolling the streets of Memphis since October, when Governor Bill Lee sent them in coordination with the Trump administration, ostensibly to try to bring down the city's high crime rate. Local officials sued to block the deployment, and last week a judge in Nashville, Chancellor Patricia Head Moskal, ruled that Lee had probably overstepped his authority under state law and issued a temporary injunction against the use of the Guard for law enforcement. This follows a pattern of challenges to deployments of Guard troops in other cities, including Los Angeles, Chicago, and Portland, Oregon. In those cases, federal suits have been brought because the president ordered the deployments over the objections of state authorities. In Tennessee, Republican state authorities, including Governor Lee, have supported the unusual use of Guard troops, but they did so over the wishes of local Shelby County officials, which is why this case turns on state rather than federal law. The judge's injunction will be stayed while the state appeals, so for the moment, Guard troops will remain in Memphis. Meanwhile, a Florida state appeals court this month let stand for now an injunction against Miami-Dade College, which wants to donate 3 acres of prime Miami real estate to be used as the site of a future presidential library for Trump. In October, a lower-level judge temporarily blocked the move in response to a lawsuit brought by a local historian and activist. The suit alleges that the board of Miami-Dade College, which is a state-run school, violated state public meeting laws by not providing specific notice about the proposed deal before voting on it. The board approved the property donation at a meeting in September, but the agenda provided no details about where the property was or what it was going to be used for. So members of the public had no advance notice in order to comment on the proposal. The Miami-Dade County Property Assessor's Office says the 3 acres are worth about $67 million. Florida Attorney General James Uthmeier appealed the decision and requested an expedited review by the state appeals court. But an appeals panel made up entirely of judges appointed by Republican Florida governors denied that request on November 12th. That doesn't mean the land deal won't eventually go through. It has the support of Governor Ron DeSantis and other Florida Republican leaders. But it means that even with friendly officials in his own home state, Trump continues to run into legal obstacles. Okay, now we're to my interview with Jim Hightower. For some people, I'm sure he doesn't need much introduction. He has been a constant presence on both the Texas and national political landscapes for decades, both through his tenure as the Lone Star State's outspoken and progressive elected Commissioner of Agriculture in the 1980s, and before and since as a prominent writer and syndicated columnist on state and national affairs. He was, among other things, editor of the legendary and still publishing progressive magazine The Texas Observer. A native of Denison, a small town in the farming and ranching country of North Texas, Hightower has long branded himself as, quote, America's #1 populist, unquote. He has long argued, and you'll hear him argue again in this interview, that the Democratic Party lost its moorings when it embraced corporate patrons at the expense of its traditional working-class base. That has become a common critique of the party in recent years, and especially since Kamala Harris lost to Trump in the 2024 election. But it's a drift Hightower started raising alarms about decades ago. He endorsed the Reverend Jesse Jackson's run for president in 1988, seeing in it the possibility of a multiracial working-class coalition. He opposed President Bill Clinton's signing of the NAFTA free trade agreement in 1993 on the grounds that it would enrich American corporations but hurt American workers. Hightower was part of a colorful group of Texas liberals and reformers who came to prominence in the 1980s and 90s, which also included Governor Ann Richards and the legendary journalist Molly Ivins. That group and its successors have been out of power now in Texas for most of this century. But Hightower, who is now 82, hasn't lost either his hope or his sense of humor. He still writes regular commentary and these days records short regular podcasts as well. You can find his work on his website, jimhightower.com. He's deeply versed in Texas political history and is able to connect current events to previous eras all the way back to the prairie populism of the late 1800s. I wanted to hear about all of that, as well as his thoughts on current opportunities for progressive politics in the state. It was a real pleasure to talk to him. This is a bit longer than our usual interviews, but well worth the time. So, Seth, let's go to the tape. All right. Jim Hightower, thank you so much for joining me. It's just a real honor and privilege.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure.
And I should note we are here at the Austin Beer Garden having a couple of IPAs. And
Superliner IPA brewed right here within 30 feet of where we sit.
That's right. So if you're going to be in Austin, this is a good place.
Yeah.
Check it out.
Yeah.
You may hear a little bit of background noise, but that's just Austin ambiance here.
Very much so.
So I wanted to start with kind of a big picture question, because you've been engaged in so many ways with politics in Texas for, I don't know, I guess going back to the 1960s, really.
140 years.
Exactly. And so I'm just kind of curious how this moment in Texas politics looks to you now. You've seen things go up and down, and obviously, you know, we're now in a period of very strong conservative Republican dominance in the state. I feel like people, especially liberals, progressives around the country, are constantly looking at Texas thinking, is it winnable? Is it about to flip? Yeah, or, is it locked into this kind of permanent red situation? What's your take on it?
Well, flipping is not something you can wait on. It's something you have to do. And there have been too many pundits and politicians who keep waiting on particularly the claim was early on, well, the population is trending overwhelmingly to Mexican American, and we're now a minority state. And so once that clicks in, everything's going to be great. But meanwhile, the Democratic Party remained a corporate party, or a corporate appeasement party. I'd put it like that, against an overtly autocratic, plutocratic Republican operation, added to by the MAGA madness in the state. So they are prevailing, but you said we're in a period of Republican dominance or right-wing dominance. That is true, but it is now a wobbly dominance. They have overreached with policies that the people of Texas do not support. For example, vouchers in schools. They finally had to force that through with money, and with just brute action in the legislature, in the governor's office, but overwhelmingly unpopular, and particularly in the rural areas of our state, because those schools in rural county, that's the main employer. And probably the county commissioner or the state representative has at least one relative who's working in that school and drawing money from it, and they know the importance of it being a little d democratic institution in their community, and they do not want corporate schools coming in. Texas is an anti-corporate state. It began as such when the populist movement that swept our country in the 1870s and 80s started in Texas. Started in a little town called Lampasas, just about 120 miles north of where we sit. 4 farmers sitting around a kitchen table saying, "We got to do something," because they were being gouged by the bankers who cheated them on loans, and then they were being gouged by the railroads who cheated them on hauling their crops to market. So that was a tremendous rebellion that eventually swept the country. 43 states had a populist movement. They elected governors, they elected state representatives, elected U.S. senators, very powerful, truly grassroots, incredibly progressive movement that included women, that included black people, that included labor within its ranks and in its leadership positions. So that is the true heart of Texas, in my view, and that goes back a long way. But the original Texas Constitution, for example, outlawed banks. You were not allowed to create a bank.
Wow.
And it took a 2/3 vote of the legislature to create a corporation. So these were not people who had any truck with monopoly, and because they were victims of monopoly power, and they knew it, and they considered themselves workers, that they were being exploited just as the industrial workers were, and so they had that alliance that came together, which made it a very, very powerful movement, and it terrified the establishment, of course. So the establishment rushed to kill it with rigging the election system, and of course rigging the economy and bankrupting the cooperatives that the farmers had created. But they could not kill the idea, and so the progressive idea. And by the way, the 1892, I think it was, a platform of the what was called the People's Party, the populist movement's political outlet. Was the most progressive political document we've ever produced in America. It suffrage for women, anti-slavery, the free schools. You name it. It was a progressive document, and that idea. Then, while they could crush the People's Party, they could not crush the idea. So it transformed into the progressive movement. It was particularly powerful up in the upper Midwest with Fighting Bob La Follette and people like that, the labor movement, and then the New Deal. And so that spirit continues, and it has continued in our state, as everywhere, with the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the environmental movement, all the movements adhere to these fundamental egalitarian principles of, well, as my father used to put it, you go beware of Texans telling daddy stories, but I had a pretty good one. And he was he was a small businessman, came off a tenant farm, and made a lower middle class living for my family, including my two brothers and myself, allowing us to get a leg up and get ahead a little bit. And my father didn't know he had a political philosophy. He would have been embarrassed to have been told he had one, but he did. And he expressed it in these terms. He said, everybody does better when everybody does better. And that's the truth. And that is a strong political reality that progressive politics and Democratic Party politics, for sure, needs to center on. And not, well, we want to help these corporations because there'll be some trickle-down effect coming. Well, we've been tinkled on for decades now, and people are looking for real change. And so that has been true throughout the history of Texas. We've ebbed and flowed, as other states have, particularly in the South, with very progressive governments, and then the money people come in and wreck that. So we had the populists, then we had the progressives, then we had the labor movement, and we in the civil rights movement, of course, and we came into for example, in the 1950s here, the money people were in charge of the Democratic Party, which was the government at the time, and so a guy named Allen Shivers was the governor, and he owned what he called a plantation down in the Rio Grande Valley. He was a nasty piece of work, and the progressives at the time had a slogan: the skunk is a dirty cat, but the dirtiest cat of all is a damned old shivercrat. So the spirit was there even then, but we were wiped out. The media at the time, mainly major newspapers, some radio stations, were controlled by the right wing, and so Ralph Yarborough, who was a fighting populist U.S. senator from Texas, became a U.S. senator, was a guy who just campaigned relentlessly, and so he was running for governor in the mid 50s, but. He could draw 3,000 people in Dallas, and there wouldn't be a word about it in the Dallas Morning News the next day. Again, the progressives you got to have a sense of humor in our kind of states. They said they came up with a slogan for the papers: the Dallas Morning News. If it happens in Dallas, it's news to us. But they didn't just moan about it. They created the Texas Observer in 1957, one of the earliest progressive statewide publications that built on the old populist publications that were very local at the time, and then they also, with labor, putting up some money and doing some organizing, went into East Texas to work with African American families, because you had to pay to vote in those days. There was the poll tax. It amounted about $25 today. It's hard enough to get people to vote without saying, by the way, you owe me $25. So they went around, and the unions actually put up the money that paid the poll tax for black families throughout East Texas, and that made a difference. And then we ran people for local office and state office and national office. So that movement produced Barbara Jordan, a member of Congress from Houston, produced Bob Eckhart, who was U.S. congressman and a state member of the state legislature before that. It produced Ralph Yarborough in the U.S. Senate, the most progressive force for public education in the country at the time.
Who you worked for, right?
Yes, I did work for Yarborough in Washington, in his Washington office for a couple of years, and learned enormous sums of how to stand up for what you believe in, and he did, and so we elected those kind of people to office. Henry B. Gonzalez, the first Mexican American to serve in the state Senate, was a part of that movement. So many others. So we basically became government from a progressive viewpoint. In fact, a quick story of Bob Eckhart. He was a pioneer in the legislature of fighting for civil rights legislation, and his mother was quite a force of nature, and she was campaigning for him in Houston, his district, and there was some kind of an event, and a right winger got up and scolded her, said, "Your boy's up there, he's supporting them black people, why isn't he standing up for us?" And she interrupted and said, "Excuse me, but that's really my fault, because I raised him to be a Christian." So again, you got to have a sense of humor and a bit of wit to make a go of it in these kind of situations. But so then the money powers came back, and in the 1970s they pretty much took over, and liberals thought that Texas had gone right wing, and that we didn't have a chance, and so we were just defeated and defeatist. But we were not defeated and defeatist, because I knew that when they said that the conservatives had taken over, they were talking about my father and mother, and the people I grew up with in this little town of Denison, Texas, up on the Red River, right next to Oklahoma. And I knew that if you had been a pollster going to knock on the door of my family's home, my father would have said, and asked, "Are you a liberal or conservative?" He was, "Oh, I'm a conservative," But if you talked to him about the oil lobby controlling the legislature here in Texas, if you talked about the power of the Walmarts to squeeze out small businesses like him, you scratched as progressive a human being as you're ever going to want to be in front of. So I ran in my first race. I was editor of the Texas Observer at the time, and as I said, I stepped off to make the only downward career move you can make from journalism by going into politics. But I wanted to show. I had no idea if I could win or not, but I wanted to show that this progressive message, direct working class, small business, Main Street, family farm message, working stiff message, was who Texans are. And if you spoke that language, and particularly if you spliced it with a little bit of humor, you were going to win some votes. And so I stepped off to make that run, and to the amazement of the political establishment as well as the media establishment at the time. Well, they said, "Well, you can't win. You're editor of the Texas Observer, a liberal publication." But what they didn't know was that I had a subscriber in every county in Texas, at least one subscriber. So I had a network, and that subscriber would be willing to host a little thing in their home or on their block or whatever. And that's real politics. If you go at it hard enough and long enough, which I did, and then I came. It's a little anecdote of populism at work. I was in Tyler, Texas, which is sort of at that time was the sort of Texas capital of the Old South. But a grand old place, really, and I had family there and knew people, et cetera. But so I was going to campaign there, and I was going to the courthouse. But we got there. A lawyer was taking me through to introduce me to the courthouse officials and stuff. But we got there afternoon. And everybody was going to lunch, so nobody was in the courthouse. But the lawyer said, "Now, wait a minute, there's this old district judge up on the 5th floor. It's an old Victorian Texas courthouse, beautiful building." So we go up there, And as we're in the going up the steps, he said, "Now don't dump your whole load on him because he's pretty conservative, you know." So okay, we're in his office, and he's got his feet propped up on his desk and leaning back, and saying, "Here's this hotshot kid gonna run for something or other. Let's hear what he has to say." And I said, "Well, Your Honor, I'm running for this office, and one of my big issues is that the gas corporations are charging too much. They're gouging the people and the small businesses on Main Street." And his feet slipped off the desk and hit the floor with a bang, bam. You know, and he leaned into me face to face, and he said, "Hightower, in your private moments, wouldn't you say they're fucking us?" I said, "Yes, sir, I would."
Yes, Your Honor.
And I will say it some more. You know? And he said, "Well, then I'm going to support you." And so I got a backing from a conservative guy with a lot of outreach in that county. And again, the message is not me. The message is the message. You know, stand up for something. And people, even those who don't necessarily agree with you, there's a hint of agreement just about in everybody. Mm-hmm. And if you can bring that out, then you're going to win. But if you try to be too smart and too clever and too tricky, you're going to lose. And particularly if you become a party of money, and that's what happened to the Democratic Party in Texas. Beginning in the 1980s, the geniuses who were the strategists and consultants for the Democratic Party said, well, yeah, Republicans are getting all that corporate money and putting it on TV, but we could get that corporate money too if we just moderate our message, you know. And so, you know, I can tell you that if you get that corporate check, written on the back of it is the corporate agenda, and they're the ones who are going to cash it. And so that's what happened to our party. Quit being a party of working class and everyday people. And so those people quit being our party, and it just got worse and worse. The more we lost, the more the geniuses decided that we just need a little more money and put up better TV ads. But they quit doing door-to-door campaigning. They quit doing in the cities, and they quit doing rural campaigning at all. A little example was the Hillary Clinton's race against Trump in 2016. To get a yard sign, you had to pay $5. Huh. You know, I mean, a yard sign is the cheapest political investment you can make because it says to other people, "Oh, there's one of me too over here," and it establishes legitimacy in a community. But to charge for a yard sign was just beyond comprehension. And what did $5 mean to that campaign? Nothing. But it was the stupidity of these campaigners who basically, these consultants, who basically believed that politics was all about money. And so we became about money. And then the National Democratic Party was doing the same thing. Tony Coelho was a member of Congress out of California, the agribusiness center of the state, and he spoke to the Democratic caucus in Congress and say, "We can get that corporate money too. I get it in my campaigns, and we can get it if we just, be for certain kind of tax benefits, and if we be for
just give them what they want."
Yeah, we just sliding down our commitment to labor unions and etc. And so stupidly not seeming to realize at all that of course they were selling out the people they were counting on for votes, and they were not really getting the votes of the people they were getting the money from. So it was an act of political suicide. The good news is that is beginning to change.
Well, and so in terms of thinking about like where the needs and the openings are, and I mean, these are national questions, but thinking about Texas in particular, like we are in this prolonged period, obviously, of conservative Republican dominance.
Right.
They can point to what they would say are the successes of that. Texas continues to grow. The economy continues to grow. Austin has obviously had this big boom. But I'm curious, in your view, you had the back in the 90s, you proposed something called the the Doug Jones average.
Right.
That, we shouldn't be looking at Dow Jones. We should be looking at how Doug Jones down the street is doing.
Right.
Well, like, what is the situation in Texas now for working people, for middle-class families? And are there areas there where there's room for the kind of outreach that you're talking about?
There's definitely room. There's room from miles and miles of Texas. It is the prevailing attitude. Texas is not a right-wing state. It's not a Republican state or a conservative state. It's a non-voting state. We generally have the lowest voter turnout of any other state in the country. And that is because our message is not resonating with people. It's not that they then want to go vote for Republicans, though some did for Trump because it was an anti-establishment thing. But they couldn't vote for the Democratic Party. I'll give you one example, national example, that I wrote about just over a year ago. There was a big pipeline fight in West Virginia and in Virginia and North Carolina. Mm-hmm. A consortium of utility giants, private utility giants, were going to ram a pipeline through for natural gas that they didn't admit, but it was really going to be natural gas to be exported to South America and Europe. But they were just ramming this thing through, going county to county to get permits. But the local counties were not approving their permits because they were ramming it through people's farms, right through communities, through national parks, through watersheds, and et cetera. So it was just a corporate arrogance, going run amok. And so basically over about 6 years of these individual battles, county by county, all across the South, they defeated this pipeline. And because the company said, well, it's not financially feasible for us. We're not going to get the permits. And so they were pulling back on it. But then Joe Manchin, senator from West Virginia, and a coal baron, and a money whore, he went to Chuck Schumer and said we need to get this pipeline through, and the lobbyists came in behind him to work the members of Congress, and Schumer wanted Manchin to vote for something else on his agenda, and so he caved into that. And so BAMO, without any public debate, without any involvement of local people at all, BAMO, that pipeline got approved.
And in the face of all of that energy and organization that had gone on at all those local levels, right? You've just kind of thrown all that away.
Well, yes, and those people noticed that. So then when Chuck Schumer came out in the next election and said, we need you to vote for us, they said, hello, do you remember us? We were the ones fighting that pipeline that you greased the skids for. And so the voter turnout plummeted in those states, and certainly the Democratic voter turnout. So you can't just screw the people and think they won't notice. And so that's the kind of, so we got to get back to just old time politics with a new time technology and all that stuff. I understand that, but fundamentally you got to touch people. A group called not Public Citizen, I know them, but anyway, they're based in Chicago. A guy named George Gale created it and ran it. Then they were in about 17 states, doing grassroots, very grassroots, Saul Alinsky style organizing, door to door, around very local issues, about drainage after floods, that kind of thing, and very successful. And so he went after Trump won in 2016. He organized, and I think it's 5 or 6 Midwestern red states, door-to-door canvassing not going up and knocking on the door and somebody shows up and you say, "Are you a Democrat or Republican?" Just saying, what would you like to see happen here in your community? Not even just your county or city, but maybe just your local neighborhood. What's missing, and just pulling them out, and they would say things like, "Well, that utility bill is just driving us nuts because we can't afford it, and it's dinner or it's pay the utility bill." So things like that would come up. Railroads coming through their dangerous. Railroads coming through their neighborhood at all hours of the day and night. So those kind of very local issues came out, and then the canvasser would say, "Well, what about these immigrants? I understand that's a big issue with conservatives." And they said, "Oh yeah, we got to stop these immigrants." And he said, "Well, are they having an impact here in your town?" No, they're really not. I don't know any of them. And then you say, "Do you understand that they don't get health care, and if they don't get health care, they're going to spread sickness?" I mean, well, no, I hadn't thought of that. And so you can reach people, but only if you're there. Mm-hmm. A TV ad isn't going to do it, mm-hmm. or an internet post. I mean, it can have an effect, but mostly a negative effect because you put negative material on ads.
Right. Or all of these texts that we all get from people right. asking for money.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I had a guy say in the last election, said, "I'd like the Democratic Party just wants to ask me how I feel, mm-hmm. not can I send $1?" Right. That's so negative. But the consultants have been in charge, and that has got to change, and it is changing. Well, here in Texas, yes, we have Republican dominance, but we have one of the most progressive members of the Congress of the United States right here as our member of Congress, Greg Casar. Mm-hmm. And he's got a district runs from southeast Boston down to San Antonio, and he's now chair of the Progressive Caucus, the largest caucus in the Congress. And having a real impact. And Greg's about 35, 36 years of age, so he's changed politics. And he's bringing out a new bunch of politics and a new bunch of political organizers who do understand that organizing is rather crucial to whether you're going to win or not.
Especially if you're not going to be chasing those big corporate checks,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. And they've learned, which Bernie Sanders pioneered, how you can stand on anti-corporate platforms and get real money mm-hmm. from people who are not corporate and are angry about corporate. And so the money is not the barrier. It is a barrier because the money is now, ridiculous. Elon Musk, $287 million spent on Trump's election. And so, it used to be $100,000 contribution used to be considered outrageous, and now $100 million is considered standard.
Right.
Well, Trump did campaign saying he said to the oil companies, "Give me $1 billion, and I'll deliver billions more to you." Yeah. And he's doing that.
He's doing it. Yeah.
That's the system. So people are angry about that money, but the Democratic Party, as a party, will not stand up to say, not only will we not take corporate money, but we think corporate money is anti-democratic and must be outlawed, mm-hmm. Which the old populist party did do. Well,
I want to jump on that P word, populism, because you've embraced that all along. You call yourself America's #1 populist, and obviously you've just been talking about kind of the populist and progressive traditions right. that you're tapping into there. But obviously in the Trump era, there's been a lot of talk about populism, particularly as sort of the populism of the right. And so I wonder, as somebody who, for example, you were critical of Bill Clinton over the NAFTA agreement. Right. And so here we are, 30 plus years later, where that became something that Trump ran on.
Yeah.
Like NAFTA's killing you. And he made inroads because of that. And so I guess from your point of view, like, is it validating or is it frustrating to see that being co-opted in that way?
No, it's totally frustrating. But it's also untrue. Trump could not deliver on any of that, and he ended up giving in to a worse NAFTA than we had. And now he's in a mess with having alienated any true partners that we might have in the world for business and trading, and at the same time he's knocking down workers and knocking down Main Street businesses and farmers and et cetera. So you have to go at it like that. He turns out to be demonstrably and almost insistently a corporatist rather than a populist, and that will out as it has been.
Right. When he does go after corporations, it's because he thinks they're not sufficiently deferential to him.
Yeah. He's only personally mad at them, but he's delivering for them, big time. And our governor here, Greg Abbott, he's a big right winger, and he, like Trump, like to think of themselves that they're playing soldier. They're the general. I'm tough. And so they're invading our cities, blue cities. They're not going to Lubbock.
Right, yeah.
They're not going to Louisiana, which has one of the worst crime rates in the country. So they're just revealing themselves, and again thinking they're fooling the people, and they are fooling some, but for the most part they're not. And it outs. So Greg Abbott, for example, just deployed Texas National Guard members to Illinois, which was the full political network of both parties in Illinois is opposed to this. We do not invite the military to come into our cities and do police work, and nor does the military want to do police work. So it's just a straight political ploy. And then it turns out that Abbott has sent 3 emails out to raise money on the fact that I stood for the people of Illinois by sending Texas National Guard troops to there.
Right. And there's a lot of speculation that Abbott wants to run for president himself. Right?
Yes. That's a delusion that he has. His popularity rating in Texas is now 60% against him.
Uh-huh.
So he's got his own problems, and he's going to have some candidates against him too. Gina Hinojosa is going to run against him, a state representative who's very well connected, very progressive, very smart, and is going to have an impact. And we've got an agriculture commission candidate, Clayton Tucker. Sounds like a country song, right? Mm-hmm. Clayton Tucker came out of the West. That's great. He's got he is a farmer up in Lampasas, the home of populism. He comes from there. And is young. He's 35. Gina's 40, I think, or something like that. So there's a new wave coming, just like the Texas Observer bunch, moved Texas to progressive, and then the money came back in 1982 when I ran as agriculture commissioner. Ann Richards ran for treasurer, Jimmy Maddox ran for attorney general, and Gary Morrow for land commissioner, and we ran as a team. So we could go campaign. One, we would support each other. So I'm here to talk about my campaign, but also I want you to know about these other things, because we're not asking you to support us. We're asking you to elect a government, and we're going to work together to do that. That's a powerful message. That's a better message than well, I'm a good person.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned those names, because that was one of the things I was going to ask you, is kind of who are the, I guess, the bright lights or the hopes that you see out there. But it sounds like there is a new generation of people coming up who are maybe more attuned to the kinds of grassroots organizing you're talking about than the people who came before them. Yeah,
and the Progressive Caucus of the Democratic Party in Texas is the largest caucus in the Democratic Party now, and we have now elected a progressive populist, working class minded state chair. He was elected because he took these stands, and because he said, I'm going to go everywhere and campaign in Texas, and I'm going to campaign for working people and farmers and regular people against the corporate interests. And that's how he got elected, and that's the direction he's trying to move the party. Now, the party establishment is still fighting him. Because that might win. It would be, what would they do then? It's just pathetic. The establishment has just so screwed us over the years for the longest time, and just with instance after instance of losing, still coming back in the same thing. Well, we had it last time with the last election. Colin Allred became the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate. And he's a good guy. He's a former football player, Dallas Cowboy, got all the right background history, but he's a moderate at best. But he hired the same consultants that run every Democratic race for governor in the last 30 years. They've never won one. But they control the lists of the members, and then they give the advice to candidates like Colin Allred you've got to go here, 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 and here, and that's it. And then you've got to be on the phone raising money, which they get most of. Well, most of it, but they get the biggest chunk of it. And so I got a call from the Allred campaign, good people, 2 months before the election, saying, we're thinking of going to Amarillo. Do you know any farmers? 2 months before the election.
They were just then thinking about it.
Yeah, right. It's just, you just want to say, go away, get out of the way for these younger people who know how to do organizing on the internet as well as door to door,
and aren't so beholden to whatever caste of
to money
consultants and corporate lobbyists and everything.
Right, totally. And so he lost badly. So now he's running again. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's going to get the nomination because it was such a poor campaign, and they alienated not him, because he gave a good speech and et cetera, and he's a personal and likable guy, but the campaign was so rude and so manipulating. It didn't have honesty, and he's got honesty, but he couldn't overcome his campaign's dishonesty in the voters' mind. Why are you just now showing up in San Angelo and Amarillo and Lubbock? And they didn't go east of I-35. They fly over to El Paso and then back out. But there's all these communities out there that are anti-monopoly Democrats, though they're voting Republican, because we don't
not being given an option.
We don't stand against monopolies. A farmer, if you're a rancher and you've got a load of cattle, you're just a country rancher. You're not a big conglomerate or anything. You got a load of cattle. You're going to go down to the auction to sell your cattle. So you load them up and you drive. Well, the auction used to be in your county. It's not anymore. It's about 3 counties away. Consolidation of the industry. And then you get there, and there's not 6 buyers of meat packers, or pork or chicken. There's one, and they say, well, here's the price, and you say, well, no, I can't do that. It costs me more than that to feed these animals and bring them to market. And they say, well, you can load them up and take them home then. That's it, And so they know about monopoly, and they despise it, as do the workers in those meatpacking plants who are being screwed horribly and injured. And, you know the story, because the South is full of chicken processing operations like that. So all the meat operations Basically, they're controlled by 4 corporations, one of which is a Brazilian. That's JBS. Used to be JB Swift, John B. Swift. Now it's Brazilian-owned, biggest in the world, biggest beef producer in the world. Tyson, which is Arkansas, and they're the biggest chicken processor by far, as well as hogs and everything. And then Smithfield Ham over in Virginia. A wonderful old product, now is owned by the Chinese and is a conglomerate operation. And so, and when those conglomerates take over, then Main Street is not getting the business because they don't buy locally. They buy from the central headquarters of whatever, of John Deere or feed company or whatever. 3 seed companies control all the seeds in the world now. Mm-hmm. It's absurd, and yet we can't get the Democratic Party to, as a group, stand up and pass some legislation to bust these monopolists. Mm-hmm. And you just it's not regulation; it is bust them up. You cannot be that big because you're too big and you're too rough on the people back home. And we believe in small enterprise. We believe in local enterprise, and that's what we're going to stand for. So the Robinson-Patman Act, which was passed during the Depression by a guy named Patman up in Texarkana, Texas, was a great old populist. He was chair of the Ways and Means Committee for years. He just angered the corporations because he was always on their case. And that's a little sidebar here. That's an interesting district because he had the district of running from Texarkana west along the Red River, and then Sam Rayburn, who was my congressman from Bonham, Texas, picked it up and carried it further west along the Red River, and then across the river was Carl Albert, who was a populist progressive Speaker of the U.S. House from Oklahoma. So, I mean, we had these districts. We have a history that is so rich and knew how to use power. Sam Rayburn said once that in a rally, well, it is true that there are many people here in this district who are more qualified than I am to serve in the U.S. Congress, but luckily none of them are on the ballot. So again, humor is key to populist politics. As I say, it's the key that opens the mind.
Sure.
If you have a little humor, particularly self-deprecating humor, and use it early and often, people will give you a break.
Along those lines, and maybe as a wrap-up question, I can't talk to you and not ask about Molly Ivins, because I'm of the journalistic generation that kind of, when I found her first collection, it was just revelatory. I knew nothing about Texas politics, but just the fact that you could write about politics with that combination of like obviously deep knowledge, but also great humor. Yeah. And I'm just wondering, I mean, obviously she's been gone for a while now, but how well do you think anybody in Texas or anywhere is kind of keeping that spirit alive in our weirdly fractured media landscape?
Well, it is fractured, but it began fractured. The original pamphleteers, every town, much less every county, had a pamphleteer, and they nailed it to the wall, once or twice a week. And then the independent newspapers, the weeklies, so important. I think of H.M. Baggerly. He was the editor of the Tulia Herald out in West Texas, and after an election, you'd see the counties. There'd be all these red counties and one blue county, and that was Tulia, Swisher County, because he had a front page editorial every week saying, here's what's going on, here's what they're doing to us, and here's who it is, and here's who's standing for us. It's so important. And so we're back to more microcosmic news outlets, including your own, including my own, my Substack, jimhightower.com.substack.
Yes, definitely. Check it out.
Yeah, right. These become valued more today. I was just up in Maine, state of Maine, for a great thing called the Common Ground Fair they have up there. They get 25,000 people to this fair of organic farmers and producers and activists and environmentalists and stuff. It's a great event. And a guy named Graham, something, I'm forgetting his last name now, but anyway, running for governor, very populist. He's an oysterman, going to win the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate, and he can win. And 2 or 3 good people are running for governor up there, and so, but Graham told me that he had been listening to my podcast. I'm on about 100-something radio stations across the country, one of which is WERU in Blue Hill, Maine. And that stands, they call it We Are You. We are WERU, We Are You. It's a terrific station combining music with populist issues. And he told me he'd grown up listening to my podcast on that radio station, and that had inspired him to think about running for office. And that's the case with me too, because I like I say, I was in college before I knew the word populist. I found it in a history book, in basic history book that was used at North Texas University of North Texas. And there were pictures of these populist things, and there was a mention of 2,000 farmers had gathered at the turn of the century in Bonham, Texas. That's 30 miles from my hometown. I didn't know anything about it. Uh-huh. There's a populist movement, much less it attracted 2,000 people. That's more people than there were in Fannin County, Bonham, Texas. But so I learned from Ralph Yarborough. I learned a lot from Fred Harris. I was a campaign manager for Fred's 76 presidential campaign. As I say, I made Fred what he is today, a professor in Albuquerque, New Mexico. but he was a fabulous guy and a wonderful speaker and storyteller, and so I learned from him. I learned from Jesse Jackson. I supported him in the 90 what 92 88 campaign, yeah, and I mean, just the best speaker I've ever heard or involved, and the most able to connect with people of all times. And I worked with him, for example, with farmers. He ran thus far still the only intentionally racially inclusive populist campaign in recent American history within the Democratic Party. He intentionally reached out to Tony Anaya, the governor of New Mexico, because he wanted that, and Little Joe Hernandez, a fabulous and well-known musician in Latino communities. He reached out to me because he wanted somebody with a cowboy hat and a white face to say this is legitimate. And he had a rally that I was part of in northwest Wisconsin, where 2,000 farmers had it, all white farmers, come to hear this man's message because he had a message. In fact, when I endorsed Jackson that year for president, there were only 2 white office holders in America who endorsed Jackson for president in the primary, me and Bernie Sanders. Bernie was mayor of Burlington, mm-hmm. Vermont at the time. And I called my father the night before I did the endorsement, which was at the state capitol, the state senate building, ornate building with Confederate soldier pictures around it. Quite a scene. Anyway, I called my father because I didn't want him to, he's got friends who are not not left-wing supporters. And I said, well, I'm going to endorse Jesse Jackson. And he said, well, he's the only one making any sense. So I thought, hallelujah, we might have something here. And he did. I mean, he ran a hell of a campaign. And again, the first intentionally populist, racially inclusive campaign. It was land breaking. But so that's my history, and that's my belief, and that's what I think that's what I think our future is not to lose we have new methods of campaigning, That's of course. But we have to have the reality of the human touch of campaigning if we expect to win and deserve to win.
Right. And have a message that resonates with people's lives.
And then try to do what it was you said you were going to do.
The other part.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
Great. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. Good. So I just want to say again, thanks a lot for talking.
I'm delighted.
It's been a delight.
Yeah, me too.
This is Thanksgiving week. In the South, we celebrate Thanksgiving with at least as much gusto and enthusiasm as anywhere else in the country, if not more. Over the years, the Southern Thanksgiving spread has developed its own regional staples like pecan pie and the beloved green bean casserole. But it wasn't always so. The South was the region of the country most resistant to the adoption of both the Thanksgiving holiday and its designated foodstuffs. As a cheeky headline on the website Atlas Obscura puts it, for decades, Southern states considered Thanksgiving an act of Northern aggression. That's basically true. Thanksgiving first grew in the early 1800s as a regional holiday thanks to a campaign led by New England magazine editor Sarah Josepha Hale, who successfully lobbied several northern and midwestern state legislatures to adopt the same day for an annual Thanksgiving. But her efforts became associated, especially among pro-slavery Southerners, with the Christian politics movement of the day, which called for social reforms and the abolition of slavery. Hale herself was an abolitionist. An editorial in the Richmond Whig newspaper in 1856 opposed the idea of a Thanksgiving Day without work, which it said would encourage drunkenness. That same year, Virginia Governor Henry Wise wrote Hale an angry letter in response to her request for a proclamation, saying he would not endorse, quote, this theatrical national claptrap of Thanksgiving. Not all Southern states were so resistant. In 1858, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and North and South Carolina adopted Hale's date of the last Thursday in November. Still, it was President Abraham Lincoln, also under Hale's influence and seeking ways to create unity in the northern states in the midst of the Civil War, who declared the first national Thanksgiving in 1863. And when the Confederate States rejoined the United States, it came with a whole new national holiday, and a menu derived mostly from Yankee foods like turkey, pumpkin, and cranberries. There was some continued resistance in the South, especially during Reconstruction. A Baton Rouge newspaper wrote in 1868 that while federal offices were closed for the day, there was little other observance. It said, very little preparation had been made for big dinners. Turkeys are scarce, pumpkins are not fashionable eating in these latitudes. And in 1873, the Alexandria Gazette in Virginia reported, quote, the President's Thanksgiving Day was observed here only partially, all the grafts of New England custom upon a Virginia stock having so far found but moderate growth. The holiday's traditions seeped in over time, and were embraced by white Southerners more readily after Reconstruction ended and federal troops departed. Southern families even warmed to the menu, which to this day remains dominated by pantry staples of 19th century New England. In other words, as with so many things in the South, even our holidays come with fraught histories. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't enjoy them. I hope yours is great. And that wraps us up for the week. Remember, the Progressive South is a nonprofit media outlet, and you can find information about contributing to our efforts on our website, theprogressivesouth.org. If you do feel moved to make a donation, thank you. Thanks also to Bark for our theme music and to Lord Seth the Libertarian for his production work at Barbarian Productions. And thanks to you for listening. Remember, you can call and say hey from wherever you are. Just leave us a message at 865-214-7764. That's 865-214-PROG. Tell us your first name, where you're calling from, and take up to a minute to let us know what's going on where you are. You can also write me at jmayshark@theprogressivesouth.org. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you later.